Okay, let's move on to our final team, and that is the third Texas team, the San Antonio Spurs. So
Hexic triangle is complete.
yeah, it is, and the San Antonio Spurs. Let's just say they made things difficult. I think during Pop's twilight years, it's a little bit sad to see a team that's experienced so much success go into a rebuilding stage at the very end of a legendary coach's tenure. It's really
Yeah.
not ideal. But this is where they're at. They're a young team. It certainly appears as though they'll be in the race for Wembanyama this year. They just their roster is kind of gutted with the DeJounte Murray trade to the Hawks, and they've kind of tried to load up on draft assets and young players, which they have done very well. The future may be bright in San Antonio land, but it's not right now. So, what do you think there is to look forward to for the Spurs this year?
Yeah, I just sort of wanted to comment on what you said about Pop coaching these this fading team in his twilight. And one thing I've felt about him is that he's kind of actually seemed to have been enjoying the process quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I got a little bit of this vibe from Carlisle, that like in some of his media interviews. It's like these old hyper competitive coaches that you could never picture doing this actually quite seem to be enjoying, rather than just like working on their win totals and trying to win championships. They seem like, oh, it's actually pretty nice to like build a team from the ground up and get back to sort of some of the fundamentals of coaching. Because I haven't heard Pop complain about it once. Says that the team's basically gotten worse every year in terms of
Yeah.
personnel and gotten younger and younger. And honestly, like Pop seems like a happy guy. Like he seems like he enjoys like kind of teaching the game to another generation. And I think that's a lot like cuter and more wholesome than the last generation of coaches who really seem to care more about legacy and going out on top and wanting to be perceived as just like, I don't know, caring about their win totals, or, Pat Riley only like coaching a team specifically when they're like a contender and then like stepping back off those Miami teams to like, like stuff like that. I just feel like we're in a different era where people are just like, no, you know what? It's like actually fun as a coach to deal with the challenge in front of you. And sometimes that challenge is winning a championship. And sometimes that's like getting a young group of players to come together. And I think that for Spurs fans, they've sort of mirrored Pop in the sense of like they are eager to move on from the DeRozan Aldridge era and sort of like just invest in their young guys and see which of the young guys they can get to realize their full potential. Who knows which of those young guys it's going to be, though? You look at this list of players. Um, the veterans are they're like, besides like Jakob Pertl is now like the veteran on this roster. Like um Deontay Murray's gone on the trade to Atlanta. Derek White gone to a trade to Boston last season. It's like Devin Vassell is now sort of like one of the like more long tenured players here. They still got some other they got Doug McDermott. They have some like older vets on the team, but we're gonna get to see all of these young guys in big roles, and I'm pretty excited about it, even if it doesn't result in a whole lot of wins this year. What do you got any San Antonio young guys that you're particularly excited about?
Well, I'm going to take a step back here and just say I thought it was one of the most disappointing offseason moves for me was seeing DeJounte Murray traded to Atlanta.
Oh,
Um,
really?
and the reason for that is because DeJounte Murray is one of my favorite players in the NBA.
Huh.
And seeing him blossom from a guy who came out of Washington as just kind of like a, big guard, super fluid athlete, just watching him run down the court with a basketball is just kind of interesting. Like the way he runs, it just is
Mm-hmm.
so unlike almost any other player in the NBA. Um, but just seeing him blossom from just like a guy who could be something but wasn't, into like an elite defensive player and really good, solid offensive player, and make an all-star appearance, his first one last year under Popovich, and then seeing him get traded was just kind of sad. And I just kind of wonder how Popovich feels about that, because that was, and maybe depending on how much longer he coaches, maybe we'll see this again. But that was like the last instance we've had of a young player who really blossomed under his tutelage. Um,
Yeah.
and now we're kind of starting from the ground up yet again. But they have a lot of young guys on the roster. They drafted Josh Primo in the first round last year, which a lot of people were very shocked by, including me.
Yeah.
Keldon Johnson is a guy who just recently got extended 4 year, about $100 million deal. Maybe a little bit of an overpay based on his current ability, but he's young and should get better and is already like a very solid starting player. And then this year, they got draft picks. They took Malachi Branham out of Ohio State, Jeremy Sohan out of Baylor. I just recently discovered his last name is Sohan and not Sochan.
Yeah.
Got the silent C in there. Blake Wesley out of Notre Dame. I don't know. They got some pieces, certainly. Like Sohan, a lot of people are really high on him. He is a guy who is just kind of a like do it all player when it comes to defense, when it comes to like just hustling, kind of getting involved, and still has a lot of holes in his game offensively. So we'll see. I mean, he's kind of very much a work in progress.
Yeah, I think mostly, yeah, Sohan has big question marks as a shooter. Not a lot of evidence there that he's likely to have an easy time becoming a good shooter in the NBA. But I really liked everything else about his game. Like you said, just sort of like a wild man out there doing a ton of things on both ends of the floor. And I think he'll be hopefully he's just set loose in San Antonio and allowed to do all those things. I think I'm most excited about Sohan, Primo, and Devin Vassell. I think just seeing if any of those can blossom in the. It's crazy to look at how young this roster is. It's insane. Like when you think like, well, maybe all three of those guys will start because I don't know who else is going to like. And some with Vassell, we've seen a lot of it's not hard to picture him as a starting quality wing in the NBA. And I do think Jakob Pertl does raise their basement a little bit, just in that they do have like a solid rim protector on their back line. I think that is one of those things that's like very much a basement raiser in terms of just like, oh, they'll actually have a path to building a more competent defense than a lot of these younger teams will. But yeah, I don't know. The offense is going to be interesting. Like none of these guys are proven as ball handlers, as shooters. It's like we're really just like starting from scratch with all this team, especially like we don't know what they're going to do with Josh Richardson, with Zach Collins, with Doug McDermott, but those guys will probably be like important rotation pieces early on. But yeah, just looking at this roster, it's hard to know really what to expect. So hopefully there's like a lot of surprises in store for this roster. And the Spurs always play really competent basketball. And they're not afraid to also like employ strange defensive lineups that work. So they're going to be worth watching, even if a lot of that is just to see like the young players get better and get in on the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes. You were looking for a name for that last year, and I was trying to figure out some wordplay because his name is literally Victor, which is the opposite of what you want to be. If you're you want to do like, I was like, how do we create a negative inference around the word Victor to create the perfect headline for this? This will be a season-long project. We'll figure it out though. I think there's some good ingredients there to figure out the name for this tank year.
Let the other team be the victor for Victor.
Something like that.
That's pretty bad. It's kind of getting late, and we've been doing this for a while. So
yeah.
Spurs have a lot of young guys that they've drafted either this year or in the past couple of years. So my big question for you is: do you think that, I mean, other than Vassell, who you mentioned before, really being a fan of, do you any of these other guys stand out to you as a guy that you think could maybe ascend and make an all-star team, be the next DeJounte Murray for this team?
I thought Josh Primo had like in the few minutes that we saw him last year, he did flash some interesting skills. He was far from being an NBA player. Like he just looks like a child out there. The combination of sort of like pull-up ability, kind of like downhill attacking and playmaking, he showed glimpses of all of that. I don't think that means he's going to become an NBA player this year, but I think it will be able to get a more solid handle on what level of potential those kind of skills all are. Is Kelvin Johnson injured to start the year? I feel like I remember hearing something about him being out with not anything serious, but he might not be starting the season. Might have
Yeah,
to
I
like
mean, well, if they're interested in Victor Wembanyama, it might be a good idea to take the Thunder route and keep guys out for as long as possible
yeah
once they get hurt. But
yeah
yeah,
oh
another thing
yeah
that
he's out with a shoulder injury. Just confirming that.
okay, another thing that kind of stood out to me, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier with the Spurs potentially competing for one of the worst turnover rate teams in the NBA, is not a lot of league guards in this roster. I mean, they do have Trey Jones, Tyus Jones' little bro,
Yep.
and Josh Richardson has spent some time being a lead ball handler, although it's been some years since that happened in
Yeah,
Miami.
once
But
upon a time.
yeah, not a lot of playmakers on this roster. Just a lot of young guards and wings um, who don't have a whole lot of experience having the ball in their hands.
I think we will see a lot of Trey Jones, and I think we will see a lot of Josh Primo operating as a point guard in that starting lineup. Because yeah, it's like that's not a spot they even really have a veteran, right? Like we mentioned, their sort of list of veterans, and I don't like none of those guys were point guards, unless I'm forgetting. It's like Trey Jones is the closest thing they have, and he's a third year player, and he's 23. So yeah, I think that's gonna be definitely one of the many places where they're gonna be a mess. But yeah, I mean, Devin Vassell looked super solid last year, and we'll get every chance to see him operating as a two-way NBA wing who can shoot and defend and uses athleticism. He was a rookie as a draft prospect. I was really into it back in the day, so I look forward to his continued development. And then yeah, my question for you is just like, can a pop coach team lose 50 plus games and really get in here? Is he just gonna like force this team to overachieve by 10 wins and only have the fifth worst record or something like that? Because that's where the expectation is set. Like there's no way to make this team win more than that, but they could drop out of the bottom four.
Well, that means less than 32 wins this year, so I'm going to go with yes. As much as I respect Coach Popovich and consider him one of the greatest coaches of all time, I do think at a certain point you just pass the barrier of just having too little talent to stay on the floor, especially in a league that's just getting more and more talented every year. It seems like.
Yeah,
We look at how deep. There's been a lot of talk about how deep and good the Eastern Conference is this year. I mean, the Western Conference is also really deep and really good. We're talking about LeBron and Anthony Davis. Even if the supporting cast isn't ideal, maybe not even being a top 10 seed in the Western Conference. There's a lot of good teams in the West this year. So, yes, I absolutely think that wins will be few and far between for the San Antonio Spurs this year.
yeah. If it's gonna be a healthy season for most of these Western Conference team, it is going to return to just being the absolute bloodbath conference. And there's going to be like good teams missing the playoffs and absolute contenders not having home court advantage in the playoffs. And but San Antonio being having one of their worst seasons. Their worst season. I started following basketball in the Tim Duncan era, so
Yeah.
like this is definitely going to be the worst San Antonio season in my living memory.
Since that 96-97 season, right? Because Tim Duncan, I believe, was in the 97 draft.
Yeah, I think they won like 24 wins with David Robinson out that. But I
Yeah.
think I think I started following basketball like that, like Tim Duncan's rookie year specifically. So
Okay.
so again, my living memory, this is going to be the worst season, no contest.